time grief we go, gotta learn to let it go.
Welcome to Wake the F Up podcast, where we talk about living consciously and helping people uncover their essential selves so that they can stop sleepwalking through life.
Welcome back to the Wake the F Up podcast. I'm Katie Coffey, and I'm filling in for Alex while she's out on maternity leave. And today we have Amanda with us, and she has a grief story that we really wanted to share. And as we touch on grief and the difficulties that people are going through and how to overcome them or how to get through them, we really just wanted to hear her story. So, Amanda, thank you so much for coming on today.
Thank you for having me.
You lost your husband, is that correct?
I did. It will be a year and a half next month.
Wow.
Yeah. So we actually got together back in 2011. He took a chance on a single mom. I had a 3-year-old at the time. So we just built our family up. We took the time marriage was kind of on the back burner. We knew we were going to be together. It wasn't a big deal if we weren't married right away. Fast forward several years, there was lots of chaos in our lives. He lost his dad. His mom had gotten diagnosed with breast cancer. Just raising a kid, getting him into school, all the things. Back in 2016, we bought our forever home. Everything was good. And in 2017, I got diagnosed with breast cancer.
Okay.
So definitely through a definite loop into our lives once again. But I came through. I'm a survivor. Got diagnosed as a survivor in 2018. So life was good. COVID hit, all those things too. But he proposed finally during family pictures in 2021. And we had decided from the very start we were doing a destination wedding. We wanted to be on a beach. Whoever came. That was the end of it. So we flew out the end of 22, right after Christmas and New Year's, and we got married in Punta Cana on January 6th of 2023. And a week following us coming back, he fell sick. He got rushed to the ER from the family farm. He just wasn't feeling good. He was in a huge amount of pain in his stomach area. He got diagnosed with an ulcer that had perforated his stomach and was in the hospital a few days after surgery. Everything was great. He was home with us for about a week and everything went south. There was problems. He was throwing up when he was eating, drinking, all the things. We live in a small community. So for a bigger hospital, he had to be transferred about an hour from here. And when he was due to discharge again, they had done an upper and lower GI, and the day he was supposed to discharge, they gave us the news that he was diagnosed with stomach cancer. No signs, nothing, which then turned into a crazy whirlwind of about 2.5 months. He was at stage 4 already when he got diagnosed. So there really wasn't a lot coming back from that. I think we both knew that, but we both tried to be very positive. We had a 15-year-old at home that needed both of his parents. And he ultimately passed away on April 7th.
I'm so sorry for your loss.
Thank you.
How are you grappling with it?
I think I had more that I knew it was coming, so I was already grieving before we actually lost him. And we went through the motions of getting a will written up because we hadn't been married long. We didn't know all the stipulations we live in Illinois, so we didn't know all the laws and all that kind of stuff. So I think that was hard to begin with, getting all of that stuff in motion. And then it didn't hit me right away, right? Because it was me. I had to do all the things. I had to plan a funeral. Our community had already been planning a benefit for him, for our family, help with bills. I had been out of work. He obviously wasn't at work. So we needed to get through all of that. Mentally took such a toll. I am not a person to put myself first ever. I'm always there for everybody else. And I definitely had to learn how to take some steps back to be there for myself and kind of get my best version of myself so I could be the best version of a mom and, everything else for our son, because a 15-year-old and grief is not a fun journey in itself.
How is your child doing with this?
He is a lot better. He just started his junior year of high school. So when we lost my husband Eric, he was finishing up freshman year. So he's made it through sophomore year, and he's in amongst homecoming week for junior year, and he is a lot better this year. He's getting really good grades. He plays sports, has a job now, has a girlfriend, all the things. So overall, I mean, he's pretty much on I think a good path right now.
Do you feel like when you were in the position where you had to kind of refocus your energy back on yourself, do you feel like he was able to see that and and kind of get through himself when he saw you do that? And how did you do that? How did you take that energy and refocus on yourself like you were saying?
So yes, I do think he saw that a lot. We definitely butted heads a lot because we are very much alike in personality wise, and Eric was kind of our buffer. So we didn't butt heads as much. Um, Now we know how to read each other a lot better too. If I'm having a day or he's having a day, we know what to look for. Putting myself first, the first thing I did is I started therapy about 2 weeks after Eric passed. I knew it was something that I needed to begin with, and I probably should have started when he got diagnosed for sure. Um, but I started going right away. I had been off work. I took mental health leave from work so I could focus on the things that need to be done at home.
What was something that you learned in therapy that was able to help you through this tough season? Or
Boundaries.
still boundaries? How
Boundaries.
so? Get into it.
We had some issues with some family. Not gonna lie. I mean, nobody's lives are perfect, and grief does a number on everybody involved, whether it's tight knit family, down the line family, friends, whatever. There was a point where boundaries had to be set on who was allowed at the house, who we were going to give our energy to in talking. There was some that felt like their grief was much larger than ours or my son's or whatever. And it's like, you need to take a step back, and it also at one point was, well, he's not his actual dad. Well, you're right. His dad's in the picture too, but he raised him for 12 years. So he's allowed to grieve just like any other child would be allowed to grieve. So that was
Somebody
a
said
big,
that to you?
oh yeah. I could write a
It
book on
is
all the things that are said that have been said.
it's shocking, and I really appreciate you sharing those details because other people that are going through grief don't know how difficult it can be, even just dealing with family. I mean, we end up talking about that so often on the podcast. And so I think that that's extremely wild that someone would say that to you, especially since y'all were together for such a long time.
Yeah.
It's 100% his dad,
Oh
you
yeah,
know?
100%.
Yeah.
And even his dad honors that. I mean, his dad was with us for the wake. His dad was at the funeral. His dad was at the benefit. His dad's family was through all of that with us. We had a good relationship. So yeah. I mean, but I also got oh, you're young. You'll find somebody else. You'll be fine. He wouldn't want you to be sad. I'm like,
Too soon
yeah, yeah, a little too soon
or
on that one.
ever. Just don't say it
Yeah,
ever. Don't say it
for
ever.
sure.
Because he's not replaceable.
No,
People aren't replaceable.
no.
Just because you meet someone new doesn't mean that that loss isn't there forever. So, when you got back into therapy, um, can you tell us a little bit about how that showed up for you and how it was able to help you?
A lot of it was that we discussed, I had a lot of like survivor guilt because I had cancer and I beat it. So then why did I beat it? To eventually lose the love of my life on top of it, like to the same, potentially same thing, just a different kind. Um, so we had to move a lot with that and just, understanding everybody's case is different. Um, that there's reasons why. I'm never going to know the reasons why, but there's obviously something that kept me here and not him here. Um, it was a lot of learning how to put the boundaries up with family because I was very much a people pleaser. I was very much, okay, that's how you feel. So I'm going to just go with it and let you talk the way you talk or act the way you act. And that's it. And that's definitely not me today. I can walk away from any conversation if I'm not happy with how you're talking and just be done with it. Um, that was a big thing for me to learn how to do though. And it's still definitely a work in progress most days. Um, my son has definitely taken the lead on that too, because he will tell you if he doesn't is not happy with you or he doesn't like what you have to say, or to his mom, he will let you know nowadays. Where he would kind of stay more on the sidelines before too, but no, he will not nowadays either. Not anything like that.
I think death and grieving has so often it tears families apart, but it sounds to me like there's something in this that has strengthened you and your son's relationship. Is that true?
I mean, he's a teenager, so I mean that just explains a lot right there. It's not the, oh mom, that this happened today or that happened today. We're not on that level yet. Which I know that just from, being a kid too. It's going to take a while to be on that level with your parents, obviously. But we do have good conversations. I mean, he tells me kind of future plans, what they're, what he's thinking about college. Him and his girlfriend have been together a year. They are talking about the long haul of they want to go to school together and things like that. And I know his friends very well, and he's more open with the conversations that most kids are like, oh, we shouldn't tell our parents that. I think he's a little bit more open with me because I'm a little bit more candid and open with him. um we've had conversations if and when I ever start to date, like if he's okay with that, if he's okay with me hanging out with anybody or spending time with anybody. And his quote is always, as long as they're not a jerk. Like, so I mean, we've had those conversations too. So I feel like, yes, definitely we've become a lot closer to each other, and not just on a mom son level, on just a person to person level too.
Where are you at now with the grief? What does it look like, and how does it show up for you on a daily basis?
Well, we're just coming off of birthdays. So anniversary of birthdays. Eric's birthday was September 1st, and then mine is September 2nd. And my son Landon's is tomorrow. So September is a little bit of a rougher month for us. But overall, I'm more in the accepting era now. And I know this is how it's going to be. And moving forward a little bit with plans and life and everything else, not moving on from him ever, but moving forward a lot more in the last few months especially. It's just been like, okay, it's time, like starting to clean out stuff. My husband was a very avid hunter and gun collector and all those things, and it's like, okay, we don't need all this stuff. I mean, my son is still hunting, so he has some of his stuff, but it's like we've got so much stuff. So I'm getting to the point where it's okay to clean out and there's not sentimental value to these things and stuff like that, where it's just kind of making life a little bit more us now and not having it all centered around losing Eric too.
Right. Is it hard to pack up stuff?
Some of it, yeah, definitely. When I did the closet, that was hard. I did like our mudroom pretty early on just because it was literally like a time capsule. He hadn't been home more than a couple days each time after he got out of the hospital before he was back in. So it's like, it was like a frozen in time. Like the shoes are still by the door and the coat's still by the door. And I could see the look in my son's face every day he got home. I knew how I felt when I got home. And I was like, okay, we need to change this. It needs to not be like that. So that part was hard, but then at the same time, it was like a breath of fresh air. Like, okay, now I can breathe. Like, there's not so much heavy now.
That's interesting that a little step like that, just cleaning out a space, was such a relief to you. And
Yeah.
it's interesting how it shows up in little ways that people wouldn't think about.
Yeah.
So for moving forward, you're in this stage, which you'll be in for a while, what is what are you looking forward to, and what's a sense of hope that you have right now in your life that you could share with our listeners that they can look forward to in their grief? Which sounds crazy. Do you understand what I'm saying? Does that make
No, I
sense?
do. I do. Um, I have found that I have become very much a more independent person. Um, I was not a homeowner before by myself. I wasn't We live on 6 acres, so I was never taking care of farm ground, like anything like that. And I can say like I'm very proud of myself. I've become very independent where I'm making business decisions. I bought myself my first brand new car. Taking care of the insurance.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Taking care of the insurance. My son is a driver now. Like, so checking to make sure our insurance is okay. All those things and learning that I can do it, even though I never had to before, was huge for me because I lived with my son's dad. And then when we ultimately split, I moved home with my parents. And I raised my son living at my parents until me and Eric moved into our first house. So it's like I never had to do anything on my own or be alone per se. And I have learned that I actually enjoy some of my peace and quiet time. And I have also learned if I don't want to do something, I don't have to do it. I'm not here to make anyone else happy except myself. And but that independence, that is one thing I can say, like, it is amazing to me because I've never had that opportunity. It just never came to be before. It's almost like you have to prove yourself, maybe just to yourself sometimes, that
Mhm.
you can do it. And if he was still here today, I would not be taking care of the bills and I could care less because he
Right.
was he took care of that part of the mortgage or, all of that where I didn't have to check the checkbook and make sure, that check came out or whatever. So yeah, I think so to a point. Yeah.
Do you feel like he was your best friend?
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
100%. Yep.
Tell me a little bit about him, what he was like.
So he came from a pretty big family. He was a fisherman. He fished with his dad and his cousins and his uncles all the time. And then went into hunting, mostly duck hunting. That was the ongoing joke all the time was, oh, just wait till duck season comes. You won't make it, blah, blah, blah. Well, we made it through several seasons, several alarm clocks going off at 2, 3 in the morning, who he's now passed on those traits to our son. So that's fun. Um, Overall, like he was a light of a room. Like he could crack a joke. He's known for his bear hugs. He loved his family very dearly. His cousins, his, immediate family, obviously, he had 3 sisters. Loved them fiercely. He was the middle child. So, I mean, but he was the baby. They always said he was the baby because he was the only boy. Um, he would light up a room. He had jokes for days, but he could be a hard ass too. Like he ran a crew, like so he knew what he was doing. He would tell them how it was, and if you don't like it, then I don't know what to tell you. So I feel like I've kind of taken some of those characteristics on now too.
I was gonna ask you, what's the one thing that you feel like is a legacy that he imprinted on you that you're now like, is now part of who you are or something that you do? Do you feel like that's one of the things?
Yeah, for sure. This is just the way it is. If you don't like it, there's the door. I don't, whatever.
And that really works for you too, because you have, like, such a soft demeanor. So I love it when a woman can say no. Like, I don't think people would expect that from you,
Yeah, no, probably not.
and they didn't, and now
No.
they know.
Yes,
Now they
100%.
know. What is the timeline? Obviously, there's no timeline for somebody who's been with someone for 11, almost 12 years, and then to lose them suddenly, and you're a year and a half out from that loss. What can people expect in this stage?
The first year, I feel like I was in a fog most of the time, like just kind of like a zombie going through the motions, like not taking it all in. I feel in a lot of ways the second year is harder. I will be the first to admit that. The feelings are a lot more there, and they're a lot more fierce. And there's days where it's like a complete roller coaster. Um, I, however, have been homebound for 2 months because I had a freak accident with my knee. So I had surgery and I had to be home. So I think I focused a lot more on the grief, and this is the way it is. There was a lot of days of crying. But now, like, looking at it, it's like, yes, the second year is harder than the first because you're accepting it, because you know that it's there and it's done and time doesn't stop, even though you want it to. Um, you just have to let yourself be open to all the feelings, because sometimes the stages of grief are all there in one day. You can be upset, you can cry, and then you can be angry. I yell at him some days, like, what did you do here? You just got to let yourself feel everything, though, and not like keep it bottled up, because that's not going to be good for anybody either.
So you feel a sense of anger, like, why did you leave me kind of thing?
Sometimes, or you left me with this house, or, there's been things that have happened, decisions that had to be made on, construction, or just stupid, silly things where it's like, I don't know what I'm doing. Why did you leave me with all this? But at the same time, I'm very thankful that even though I didn't have to be independent, he taught me how to be independent because he was gone a lot for work. So I had to still know how to take care of things. So it's just more, the second year I feel like is more an accepting year, and knowing this is just the way it's going to be, and you can't fix it, and you can't sit on it and dwell on it all the time, every day.
What are you wanting for your grief to look like, say, 3 years from now?
Well, I am actually going through the motions of becoming a certified grief coach. So I'm trying to take my stuff into consideration and trying to help other people. That's my goal, is for nobody to feel alone. I mean, I was 39 when I lost him. I'm 41 now. He had just turned 40 that September before. So young widow on top of it. There is not support out there for it. There's very little support out there for it, especially when you're going through the motions of still running a house and working and raising kids. So I have already started like a Facebook like group page for our community, and
Mhm.
almost overnight it already had 20 followers on it,
That's
which
awesome.
blew my mind. Where it's just for this area, to know that there's that many of us that have lost our people and are raising
Yeah,
kids, because you can sit there and go to a widower, grief group, and you are surrounded by 70, 80-year-old ladies who were married for 50 years and don't have a clue what it's like to go through all of this now, raising your kids and trying to make sense of anything. So my hope is that I can move forward and help girls or guys that lose their people early and still have kids and still have responsibilities, and unfortunately can't just lay in bed day in and day out and grieve. They've got to get
yeah,
up and got to keep moving. Because I know personally, I think that's like the stigma with grief, right? Like when you become a widower, you're that whole like black veil and wearing the black and not allowed to move forward, that you're stuck in that, and like you stay in bed and you're cooped up. I know that there was a lot of maybe back talk towards me, but not, it wasn't right at me when he passed, because I was still doing things. I live in the gym. Well, not currently because of my knee, but on a normal basis, I live in the gym. A couple weeks after, like, I was back in the gym. Like, that was my part of my therapy. And I'm pretty open on social media, where it's like, okay, this is what I'm doing, like, and I can remember my niece had asked me if to go on her field trip with her because I was off work, and she's little, like first grade.
mhm, mhm.
Will you go with me? Because mom can't take off work. And I was like, you know what? Yeah, I will. It'll do all of us some good. All of the kids were very close with Eric, so it was a hard time for everybody.
Mhm.
And I know that there was like, oh my God, she's going to do that kind of stuff. Or she's out doing things. Yeah. Cause I still have a kid to raise and I still have all these other small children that are in my life that need to see that we can focus on good things too. So I think it's just a stigma when it comes to widows or widowers. Like you're not once you're seen out doing something, it's like, oh my God. Or, she's moving on, which was never the case, but just when they see you out in public or, doing things, it's a taboo subject of why you're even out.
And then you have to defend yourself over like, I'm the one grieving here, people. Why are you
Mhm.
concerned with me? Worry about your own self. Like,
Yes.
that's crazy. One thing that Alex says and talks about often is when your person dies after the fact, because everyone had you in their mind attached to this other person, like after they die, people want you to die too. They don't know it. It's maybe unconscious, but their expectations are you're supposed to stop living, and it's very unfair. And that's how she talks about like why it's so isolating because people just don't understand what you're going through. So I think it's awesome that you are so passionate about wanting to help young grievers, which is awesome because that's Alex's, that's what we're all about here.
Yeah.
Um, so what would you do to help others in grief? What would you like to do? How will you show up?
Like I said, my end result is I want to be a grief coach,
Mhm.
obviously through and through. I worked very heavily with Whitney Allen after I lost Eric. She was my grief coach, and we still
Awesome.
do like monthly check-ins. And I've talked to her plenty about it. That's one big thing. And my other thing is I became part of a foundation. It's called Clear Ribbon, and it's more centralized, like in Illinois and stuff like that. But it's for cancer widow and widowers. And I've talked a lot with the founders. Somebody had sent our name when we lost Eric, and they'd sent a care package, and I've stayed in contact. They do some family outings. I've taken Landon and his girlfriend with this past spring, and we did that. My hope is to try to do a non-for-profit eventually for young widows and getting the help they need and the support they need, because I was very lucky. We had a tribe of friends and family that were ready to show up when we needed it. We had a community. He was very well known in our community. He was a volunteer. He was on volunteer fire department, all those things. So he knew a lot of people. But there's people out there that don't have that, and they need the help, or they just, they need a package in the mail that says, "Hey, we got your back." And not everybody has that. So that's my dream, is to eventually be able to start something like that.
Whenever you do, let us know. We want to be a part of
Right.
that. We're all about that. Could you give us a few tips for young widowers who are parents on how to navigate this season with teenagers?
Oh, um, teenagers are hard. They're a breed all of their own, and I feel like this generation now is so different than even like when I was growing up. I mean, and obviously every parent says that, but we have like in our family and immediate family, I have 5 nieces and nephews on my side, and Eric had 10. So it's all sorts of different age ranges, right? Like, I mean, from 23 down to the youngest on his side just turned 13. So the youngest on my side is a little bit younger. They're grade school still, like little grade school. But teenagers, you can't make them do anything. You can't force them into therapy because they're not going to talk. You can't force them to come out of their bedrooms because then they're really not going to talk to you, and they're not going to like you very much if you make them sit on the couch with you or do the things. You have to let them figure out their own. I can say, for example, Landon, Eric died. Obviously, he died in intensive care at the hospital. And he was surrounded. There was like 20 of us there that day, including Landon's cousin, who is a year older than him. So she was 16. He was still 15. Those two kids went through the ringer together because she wanted to be there for him. And that's fine. But that night, he wanted to go stay with his friends. And that was fine. I let him go stay with his friends. I don't think every parent would probably do that. And they'd be like, oh, no, you have to stay with your family. I knew that's not what he needed. He had been surrounded by family. We actually had to fly him home. He was on vacation with his dad's side of the family. We had to fly him home so he could be there to say goodbye. So he needed his friends. His friends were a good support system as well. His friends' parents were a good support system. So you have to know how to read your kids and not just be like, oh my God, you're going to therapy, because it's not going to work. I talked to my therapist about it. If they don't want to talk, they're not going to talk. It's going to be a waste of time and energy for everybody involved. My child decided to, be a little bit of a wild child that last summer, where he got himself into trouble, not like with the law, but with mom. He definitely got himself into some trouble, and he learned from that. And it was him acting out like he needed that. I don't know. He just needed to be wild for a while. This summer, he was not wild at all. But you have to learn how to read your kids, and you have to know at least a little bit of where their minds are. I mean, he has had very many meltdowns. He's lost it several times. Opening season for Ducks last year, for example, was very hard. Eric wasn't there. He had been hunting with Eric for 3 years. He went with Eric's cousins because they're all very close. They've stayed very close with Landon, but it wasn't the same. But it wasn't the same for those guys either. They had been hunting half their lives together. But for Landon to see that everybody was grieving in their own way, I think it helped too. Like, you can't shelter them from that. You can't just try to hide it all from them. You got to be raw with them sometimes, especially teenagers. You've got to let them kind of pave their own way, though. They're going to tell you what they need. Maybe not right out in front, but you're going to be able to tell what they need.
I think that's probably the hardest thing for a parent. I look back on which is just different, but just parenting in general. Like, I remember being a teenager and my parents being totally overbearing and totally controlling, and probably in the wrong so many times. But I look back and I'm like, but if they hadn't been during that one particular thing, I really don't know where I would be. And so I imagine that it's very hard for a parent in a grief journey with a child to be like, okay, when should I be worried? And could you answer that? When should you be worried?
I guess it would depend on the age. Landon, he was 15 going to be 16, so he was close to getting his license. I noticed, there was vapes that were found that summer. There was some alcohol that was found. And I talked to my therapist about it too. But then I looked back. My parents were also somewhat overbearing at times, could be very strict. I pushed the limits because I rebelled. And she said, unless it's affecting how he is on a daily basis, other than this is a kid being a kid, not that it's okay. Obviously, you still don't want your kid doing that at 15, 16 years old. But unless it's affecting day to day, he's not coming out of his room. He's not talking to his friends. My son's big thing that year was gaming. He had gone in at the benefit. Somebody had donated a PS5, and that was for him. Like, they gave it to him on stage. And if I noticed that he wasn't doing that anymore, or, we have dogs, they're like his life. If he wasn't hanging out with the dogs or playing with them, those were times where you needed to really start questioning, okay, what's going on? Overall, though, he didn't lose interest in anything. So that's a big thing that they told me from the very start. If you notice he's starting to lose interest in the things that he used to love, then it becomes where you're going to have to step in and be like, okay, what's going on? And if you're not going to tell me, then we are going to find somebody that you're going to talk to.
Yeah.
So, and he talks to his school counselor, which is fine. Like, if he's having a day, he just goes in and talks. It's not always about grief. It could be about sports. It could be, about the weekend, whatever, but he goes and checks in. So that's a big thing. Until you know that they're not into what they love anymore, that's when you need to worry.
Thank you for sharing that. So we're a year and a half out. Are you thinking about dating? Have you thought about it? Where's your head with that? I have to ask.
Um, it is there. Like, I would potentially like to. I have a couple friends that have been like, "Can we set you up with somebody?" I looked at the online dating for like a hot minute and I was like, "No." I just if and when it's going to have to be a slow thing, obviously. I'm not going to like jump into anything head first. But I mean, yeah, I mean, one of my friends just last week was like, "I have a single friend and they asked if I had any single friends and I thought of you and can I maybe set you up on a date?" And I'm like, "Okay, like that's fine." So we'll see if it happens, but you know,
Hmm. To be determined.
yes, 100%.
So, what do you do for work? I don't think I ever heard that from you.
So I work for a healthcare organization here in Illinois. It's called OSF Healthcare. We have 15 facilities. One is in Michigan. In our region, we have four hospitals. And I am a health record ambassador for our facility. So I do medical record requests, I do chart analysis. I handle like subpoenas for records that come through, lawyer requests that come through. And then I analyze charts to make sure everything is in order, that all the forms are there once they're discharged, or if they had surgery, all the things like that.
So, a year and a half out from your Eric's passing, do you find that your grief shows up at work ever? Do you struggle to get work done?
Um,
Yeah.
yes. So I was very much so last year. I was in a different facility. I had moved to a bigger facility back in 2020. And the job that I have wasn't available in the smaller, like rural health community hospitals like it is now. So at the end of last year, I moved back to my small hospital that I had started at. Um, and things are a lot better there. It was a lot more in-depth chart analysis and things like that, where the biggest trigger for me was a DNR form. Like, if there was a message like, "Hey, the DNR is not in here," or whatever, I had a very hard time with that because Eric was full code up until 48 hours before he passed. And they pulled me out of the room and said, "We feel you need to sign a DNR. What are your thoughts on that? We know he always wanted to be full code, but what's going to happen if he codes. And, do you want him to live like that?" And I'm like, "Absolutely not." So for a long time, the DNRs were a big thing for me.
What is that? I'm sorry. For those of us who are listening who don't even know what that is. I think I
It's
know what it is, but
Yeah, so it's a do not resuscitate form
okay, yeah.
that you fill out, and there's different guidelines. Like, you can say, like, "I don't want to be hooked up to feeding tubes," or "You can do CPR on me, but I don't want to be on a ventilator," things like that. Eric was a full code, so anything to keep him alive is what needed to be done. So I potentially then signed the DNR about 48 hours before he passed, which then allowed him to pass without CPR measures, which could cause like breaking your ribs or shocking you, or, something happening with a brain injury where you will never come out of it, or being put
Yeah.
in a coma, all those things. So that's hard for me. But at the same token, I now know, like, I want to have one on file for me now, even at 40, because I don't want my child to ever have to make that decision, or my power of attorneys to have to make that decision down the road. Because that was a very hard thing. And when all eyes are on you of, are you going to sign this or not? Everybody has a view on it too. So I'd
I never
rather
thought
just
about that.
cut and dry. Oh yeah.
This is an interesting thing to talk about because I'm sure obviously you're not the only person going through this or having to face this. And I don't think I've heard Alex talk about this, but yeah, some people probably would be upset one way or the other, right? And did you get any
Yeah.
lashback about that?
Not to my face, I didn't, if that makes sense. I'm sure there was
Mhm.
plenty unspoken.
Mhm.
Um, but it wasn't their husband. It wasn't their best friend. It Because I was sick before him, those were conversations we had a long time ago. And I wanted to be full code until something happened as well. At the time, we had a 10-year-old, but it comes to a point where you don't want anybody to suffer either. So if you're going to bring them back just for them to be on machines, that's not a life either.
Because you went through cancer yourself and got over it, do you feel like that gave you a sense of strength in any way at all to kind of get through this?
I think so. Yeah. And it was more like I didn't have the false hope, like, I'm just gonna be positive about everything, everything's gonna be fine. Once I knew certain things or knew, more of a diagnosis and stuff like that, it was time to be real about things too and be like, "Okay, we need to get this in order. You could come out of it 100%, and I hope to God you do, but we need to get things in order." And I needed to be more like the strong one in all of it, because there was very few times I think that I ever broke down. I just kept going. I mean, I worked remotely from every hospital he was at. I was working remotely, so we still had a paycheck coming in. Um, all the things. Like, I mean, I would come home for like a day or two if somebody else stayed with him, because that was one thing. He was a very independent person until he got sick, and then he never wanted to be alone. Somebody always needed to be with him at the hospital, which was fine. But sometimes I needed to come home. So, one of his sisters or a cousin or his mom, somebody would stay with him and I'd come home. But I wouldn't come home to just come home. I came home so I could work and check on the house, check on Landon, check on just everything here, and then go back down and relieve whoever stayed. So I think it gave me a lot more strength than, this is just how it's going to be. And we got to move with the motions.
If you could give one piece of advice to a young griever that can help them if they took away one message from this podcast, what would that be?
Get out of bed every day. Don't stay in bed.
Well, thank you so much, Amanda. Everyone, thank you for listening. Please like and subscribe and tag a friend who's grieving, someone you know that's going through a widow or a widower who needs to hear this message of hope. And we thank you so much, Amanda. Thanks for
If you enjoyed this episode of Wake the F Up, please like and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Join the Wake community by downloading our app. Just search for The Wake Wellness in the Apple or Android App Store. And follow us on Instagram at The Wake Wellness.